Welcome to the lecture 31 of lecture series Psychology of Well-being. Well, this lecture is focused on the issues of well-being faced by the migrant laborers, the poor migrant laborers living in the Indian cities. We have to migrate to the urban centers or cities in search of earning their livelihood because of variety of circumstances, and then it becomes a very challenging time for them in terms of their well-being or mental health. So this lecture is based on a study conducted by Dr. Sangeeta Yadav, who has been interested in the ethnographic studies or qualitative studies of uh, understanding the experiences of distress, healing, or mental health of such migrant laborers. So the insights that we are going to develop through this lecture involves the context of rural to urban migration in India, then recapitulating the use of concepts of suffering or the struggle for well-being, and then the study by Sangeeta Yadav regarding experiences of suffering among the migrant laborers. And then finally, we'll be looking at the implications of these findings for well-being and rehabilitation of the migrant laborers in India. Well, the context of rural to urban migration in India involves some unique yet disturbing features, such as 28.5% of Indian population constitutes of migrants migrating from their native place, people who might have to migrate from their native place in search of primarily uh, their livelihood. And 30% of migrant population comprise manual laborers migrating to cities from their villages. These migrant laborers usually have to face adverse physical living conditions, lack of housing, sanitation, basic necessities of life, etc., besides hostility from the locals. So imagine a person going to cities and the plight in terms of physical living conditions, such as improper housing, sanitation, and basic necessities of life that they have to struggle for, besides the hostility that they may face from the locals at times. And living in an alien culture with differences in languages, accent, values, and customs. So that can be quite challenging that, the social world of the person who used to live in the city with a different kind of language, values, customs has changed all of a sudden by migrating to a different place. And then feeling uprooted or lack of emotional support, usually available with the family or relatives in the village. So that feeling of being uprooted from one's home is another challenging condition that they got to face as a migrant, poor migrant laborer. Well, reasons for migration of these migrant laborers usually include development policies in terms of how much of employment opportunities have been created in the villages in comparison with the cities. It has been very less. Or Not enough energies have been spent by the government, or not much concern apparently seems to be there in the policies for channelizing the skills or energies of the people living in their rural habitat, while development is more focused in terms of the urban centers and the job opportunities being there, and more often than not, all such employment or job opportunities are related to a particular political system that favors the benefit of the people who are already wealthy or those who are capitalists. So, the capitalist economy is something which is widely recognized by psychiatrists, social scientists, among others, that has been adversely shaping the well being of the worst affected people or the most vulnerable people, like migrant laborers who are already poor. And then, as we were mentioning, lack of employment opportunities is another reason for migration, besides the family quarrels or disputes. Well, suffering as a mental health experience is important to be understood, and as we have already understood it, the people can suffer from what they have lost of themselves in relation to the world of objects, events, and relationships. And most generally, suffering can be defined as the state of severe distress associated with events that threaten the intactness or coherence of a person. Well, let's look at the categories of suffering among migrant laborers, and these include demoralization. We'll be going into the details in terms of definitions and exemplars later on. But let's look at these categories: demoralization, debilitation of relational self, burdened self, disenfranchised and alienated self, disempowered self, being judged as powerless, loss of faith in the system, and sense of self defeat. Let's look at the first one. What is the meaning of demoralization? So, constant presence of overwhelming distress due to inability to fulfill the social moral roles and obligations, or finding little scope to follow one's way of life, relating with others, finding a job as per one's values. A participant, Rajkumar, was the eldest son of his parents, but he could not cremate his mother as he was unable to reach his native village in time. This was painful for him as he could not perform the rites as per his religion or culture that the eldest son should cremate his parents after their death. And he mentions, when my mother died, I was in Punjab. All of a sudden, my mother died. It took me 2 days to return there. I could not see my mother for the last time because my family members had cremated her. I'm the eldest son, but I could not cremate her. I could not be with my mother in her last moments. She raised me, she gave education and values, but if I would have had some employment opportunities at my place, it would have never happened. What mistake have I done that God had punished me so severely? This question and guilt will remain with me till my death. The other one being burdened self, that is, forced to live a life which does not want to live, which one does not want to live, or is not supposed to live because the values or the constraints don't allow. Rajesh narrates his distress related to abandoning his dreams due to financial constraints that forced him to migrate. And he mentions, I never thought of doing this work. After I passed class 12, I wanted to do some computer hardware related courses, but it did not happen due to financial constraints. I could not fulfill my dream. I secured 7% marks in my class 12 exams, but unfortunately ended up as a construction worker. Even as even an illiterate person is capable of doing this work, I'm unable to get any respectable job. My family is dependent on me. I have to take care of them and also have to fulfill my dreams. If I give priority to the future, the present will be ruined and if I focus only on the present, my future will be lost. That's burdened self or being forced to live a life which one doesn't want to live or is not supposed to live because the values of the or the constraint don't allow. Well, disenfranchised and alienated self, the meaning of this category is intense distress or agony of feeling deprived of the resources or privileges to have a dignified life and developing an acute indifference for the system that pushes them to live at the margin of the society. Bhuvneshwar narrated about his circumstances that led to his alienation, and he mentioned, I have to take debt in any crisis as all my savings go to the money lender. The land which I had in my village was taken away by government officials and was compensated with very little amount of money. Whatever I plan, it never happens. Happiness is not my cup of tea, it is property of rich people. Those who have resources, land, vehicles, money, permanent job, etc. Had I been a rich person, I also would have been happy. I don't know what mistake have I done that I am living in such a destitute condition. I earn so little that I am unable to provide even proper food to my family. When a poor man attempts to do something, it always ends in disappointments. My earnings do not sustain me. Poor can never rise. Another important aspect of their suffering is being judged as powerless, which means the anguish of being judged as disempowered. Bhuvneshwar further narrated, when my son was ill, the doctor refused to admit him in the hospital. He said I was incapable of paying bills since I am poor. I requested him to admit my son into the hospital and promised to pay all the money, but he declined. I bent on my knees with folded hands and again requested him. Doctors never admit the poor easily. When a rich person needs the money, he gets it, but when it comes to the poor, nobody lends a helping hand. And finally, the sense of self defeat, the state of intense distress where one feels that he or she is constantly being defeated by the uncertain and malicious situations, hence, develops a sense of hopelessness and acute disappointment towards life. Rajkumar narrated his sense of self defeat in the following narrative piece. I have two daughters and two sons. Recently, one daughter got married, and all my savings have gone into that. Another daughter is still unmarried. I have many responsibilities, but my income is insufficient. Though I am trying to bear those responsibilities, but it seems that I will fail. Another anything good has never happened, and I am sure it will never happen. I'm feeling that I am being defeated by the situations. Well, implications of such insights for well being and rehabilitation. Well, we already have noted in his article, What Ought Psychology to Do? Jackson talked about the following. Dr. King praised this group, and he's talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was addressing the American Psychological Association way back in 1968. So Dr. King praised this group and noted that psychologists are charged with the solemn mission of helping people live well adjusted, fulfilling lives, but with a caveat. He challenged you to foster what he called creative maladjustment. By that he meant people should question the precepts of society and reject those that permit injustice to form and grow. He viewed the social sciences as instruments of social change, saw their mission as the extirpation of evil. He appealed to you to observe and report fully and accurately the complexity of our societal relations. Further, he called for research on how structural change designed to promote a more just society might be crafted and implemented. The everyday suffering of these migrant laborers that we got some insights about through Sangeeta's work, Dr. Sangeeta Yadav's work, may remain further silenced unless structural change, that is, development policy and lack of employment opportunities, besides family and community intervention, is also addressed. Thank you very much.